Whether you're just looking to stay warm during a hunt or need maximum concealment, the clothing you wear can make or break a hunt. At MidwayUSA.com, we understand hunting clothing has come a long way with more meticulously crafted camo patterns, advanced scent control technologies, and weatherproof options to withstand the elements. Hunters have to wait until their favorite season, but shouldn't wait on gear, which is why Midway USA offers super fast shipping. When you're ready for your next system, log on to MidwayUSA.com.
If you hunt enough, you learn the truth. What you seek speaks a language and knows it well. That's why every Primo's call for everything you hunt is made the right way. We sweat every detail so you get more out of every hunt, and nothing leaves our hand until we know it'll work in yours. Because we don't just make the world's best calls, we speak the language. Primos.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast brought to you by Huntworth. Huntworth gear for all types of weather, all types of terrain, all types of budgets. It's clothing that just works. Check them out at huntworthgear.com. And right now they've got their preseason sale going on all Tarnin and Disruption camo. And it doesn't work on the clearance stuff, and the new Vertex stuff is excluded. But if I was going to pick up one piece of any of the Huntworth stuff with this 30% off, I would be grabbing the Grayling hoodie. I feel like that's a great option for early season for us guys in Michigan, where it's, you know, kind of chilly, but it's not that cold when you walk into the woods. You don't need a heavy jacket or anything like that. But that Grayling hoodie has that heat boost in it. It's windproof. It's kind of a thicker, stiffer material. I would definitely be checking that out if I was just going to pick up one thing. And that code is PRE30, PRE30, to save 30% on any of the Tarnin or Disruption camo. So I did just get one of the Maverick saddles in, and I took that sucker out of the box. And for saddle hunting, for me, it isn't about weight. But man, there is like nothing to that saddle. It is really nice, and for the money, I think it's going to be hard pressed to beat. I'm going to put it through its paces a little bit more. Get a video out on it probably next week. But that saddle, I'm very looking forward to using that this year. So hop over to Latitude. They do have the Lone Star, that TX5 collaboration out as well, and that is what do they call it? The Sadillac of saddles. Like every feature, lots of support, a lot of adjustment, really incredible saddle. But I'm a simple guy. I'm a Maverick guy. I mean, even when they came out with it, Jake was like, this is going to be the saddle for you. So check that out. Latitude, you can use code BHC to save 15% over there. And other codes for other partners, you can use code Bowhunter with Spartan Forge online to save 25%, as well as Big Shot Targets. You can use BCP to save 10%. And I've been using that Spartan Forge online. The LiDAR for me has been like the game changer. I hate that word, but that's what I've been doing because, you know, the aerials are good, UAV is good, the different satellite views are good. But using that LiDAR in like a dense forest, you can see like the old logging roads. You can look at creeks. You can look at the like creek banks, all that stuff. And to me, that's what's really kind of set things apart for me when I'm looking at a big woods. These little micro terrain features or whatever, or things that may, you know, adjust deer, funnel deer. And it just gives me a different look, a different starting point, and kind of a way, especially for access. So if you haven't been using the LiDAR, go down to the maps, click on LiDAR, and just kind of poke around and take a look and see, you know, how different it is. You know, all of our partners, Canadi, I just got their arrows in. I'm trying to Noctune, Paper Tune, the ones from a trad bow, and getting that, I just got lucky on the last ones, the arrows that I were shooting. Just put on a couple different field points, but these ones I'm going to have to stiffen up a little bit. So I'm going through that, but a new set of Canatis, Zingers, those are just incredible guys, good friends of ours. Genesis 3D, check out that sub 1 camera arm and that tripod head that he's got with that to use with your camera or just to put your phone on there. Integrates right in. Definitely check that out. And we did just get some of the Vitalize seed for the property in the UP, switching over to that fall mix. So definitely check out the guys from Vitalize. Get it in there. We're right there in the mix, especially for Michigan. Maybe a little late, but up in the UP is not a bad time. And just looking forward to the season, getting everything ready for the Patreon hunt. I was up there doing some more work, clearing the land to accommodate as many people as we can get. So if you haven't let me know that you're coming up there, definitely do that. Definitely get on up there, get over to Patreon, send me a message, shoot me a text, something, so we can coordinate who all's going to be there. Really, really looking forward to that. But this podcast with Matt Lehr, we go into how we met and kind of all that stuff. Matt's been on the podcast before. We kind of talk about Matt with his podcast, maybe like what things have changed with the podcast. And then, he shoots the 200 and some inch deer and everything that goes along with that, and having a platform and kind of the pitfalls and how it changes the mentality of or if it changes your mentality of how you approach the woods going forward. And all of that. Matt is a very, very positive guy. He has a passion for teaching and helping other guys, and very humble guy. So I think you guys are going to enjoy this podcast, but it's a little bit different than maybe some of the other ones that Matt's been on. So as always, everyone, thank you for listening. Enjoy the episode. All right, everybody, Adam back with another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast. And we're joined by what I feel is kind of a very special individual here today. And I say that with, the utmost respect and all of that, but, and he'll be like, oh yeah, whatever. It's not a big deal. Matt Lehr, right? So we've had Matt on in the past, and we talked about hunting out of state, planning out of state hunts and stuff like that. And then, it's just 6 months later, he goes out and he's like, I just killed a 200 and some inch buck, no trail camera, on public. I knew where he was, out of state. So I want to dive into that, because, we've had other guys, that have killed 200 inch bucks, and it's been a deer they knew about that they kind of patterned, private land, guys when you think Adam Hayes, it's funny, Matt's wearing a Ozio. So you think, okay, Joe Miles, Team 200, Adam Hayes, that sort of stuff. And the Mobile Hunter Dojo guy, right? This guy that comes out of nowhere and he says, I don't kill big deer. I kill okay deer, and I kill them out of state. And it's nothing special. So I want to dive into that. And that's why I think that it's very special, because guys, they don't act like that when they kill deer like that. You know what I'm saying? So Matt, how are you doing, and how do you feel about that intro?
Yeah. I think anytime we talk about me killing deer for whatever reason, I get a little uncomfortable about it. I think I always like to put the spotlight on people that I view as really consistent, really know their stuff. And I feel like I'm just bouncing around the woods and kind of, getting lucky every once in a while. And, but I appreciate the intro, for whatever it means. Yeah. I don't know. It's just, I've always been that way. I've always been uncomfortable with, I guess, compliments or whatever. So, I think it really stems from just kind of knowing who I am. I'm a pretty simple approach kind of guy, And so I don't ever try to like, I don't ever want to claim that I know a whole lot, because I really don't, and I think that's just something I've been really cautious of. I don't want to portray myself as somebody I'm not. And so sometimes I may downplay. If you can hear that, sorry. I moved my studio. Has not been a good fit. So I might have to move the studio again. But yeah, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense at all? But
no, I mean, it's just the humble nature, right? I have very minimal success compared to a lot of the hunters that I have in here, like you included. And it's funny because like our relationship started with Matt reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, I like the podcast and I'm just getting back into hunting. I'm looking for someone like to, maybe be like a hunting partner or like go out of state." And I was like, let me scroll through your stuff here real quick. And yeah, you're on a completely different level than me. So I don't want to like bring you down. I think that you've got a lot more. And you're like, "No, I don't think so." And I'm like, "Yeah, let me introduce you to some guys that I think would be like a good fit." And it seems to have worked out pretty well because you're still hunting with those guys and you keep in contact with them. And to me, like it's a lot easier for me because I just am like, "Oh, I'm the world's worst bow hunter." It's like, it's I don't have to prove anything. Like you don't have to prove that. Like nobody calls you out on it. So for you, from kind of taking a hiatus from hunting and then coming back into hunting and then deciding, you know what, I want to come at this from like a teaching approach and I would like to start a podcast. When you started the podcast, like what were your goals and like what did you do to set yourself apart? And then what have you done, to kind of I mean, you're doing it now by quote unquote like saying all the right things, and I know that you're like this, like off the podcast and all that stuff. But it's real easy to, say all the right things and then be like, "Oh yeah, I have this podcast and I kill big deer and all this stuff." So, how did you go from like just kind of like diving back into hunting to be like, "Okay, now I need to do a podcast"?
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned all of that. Actually, it kind of actually gave me some clarity on maybe why I don't like talking about the deer that I shoot and all of that. So I'm going to I'll go really quick elevator speech on even why I walked away from hunting. So I put my identity into my ability to kill deer. And the funny thing is at that time, I wasn't killing deer. And so I was stressed out all the time and I was obsessing about deer constantly, like all of us do. And I was on maps all the time and I was gone all the time. And I actually missed, when my kids were little, I missed them growing up because I was gone hunting all the time, to the point where it actually, like my wife came to me and said, "Look, it's either deer hunting or the family." And she wasn't joking. I mean, she had papers in hand. And so I had to make a decision. And I'm the kind of guy that's all in. Like I obsess about things, whatever I'm doing. I'm going to be all in on it. So I knew I couldn't dabble. I didn't trust myself to be able to like just not scout and go after things and just walk out to the woods and be happy with it. And the problem was I could actually do it now. The problem was because I needed to be able to prove myself in that field. And I hadn't, and I hung around people who were extremely talented at hunting and they worked hard and they accomplished a lot of things, with putting down big bucks, and I hadn't yet. And so I had to walk away from it because I knew I wouldn't be able to balance my family and hunting at the time. And enough time went by where I no longer felt exactly the same way. It's something I still struggle with from time to time. And but there was a point where I felt like, hey, I can probably balance this. I got older. I think years kind of mature you, and I found value in my family and my faith and a lot of other things. So hunting didn't weigh as much anymore in my life as far as that goes. And so when I came back to hunting, things were different. My kids were older. My wife was like completely supportive of it because I was there for the family and did the things that you're supposed to do for your family. And so like all of a sudden I had this momentum behind me of like, go out there and try to do this thing. And I, for whatever reason, I can't tell you why, but I looked at hunting different when I came back. Like my mind was thinking differently. and maybe it was just maturity and maybe not having the pressure that I put on myself. And I started to find success immediately when I came back. I mean, I think the first time I came back, I killed, I don't know what it was. He might've been 110 inch, 8-point in the Indiana public within the 15 minutes of doing map scouting and getting back in there. And then it just started snowballing from there. Well, I was putting in crazy. So in 2022, I was putting in 100 and some miles on a 1,000-acre piece in Illinois. I was, going back there 6, 7, 8 times, breaking down the piece, trying to figure it out. And that's where that whole story with the buck that I killed last year started. And I was listening to podcasts, not a lot of them, but the ones I was listening to are guys that I respect to this day. And I love listening to them speak. But I felt like, man, I can't keep up with them. They were putting in 200, 300, 350, 400 miles. And I'm like, man, I can't do it. And if I'm all or nothing and I want to try to get to that level, I almost felt like I might have to walk away again because I'm not going to be able to keep up with it. If this is the standard, I can't reach it. And then something started to switch in my mind and was like, well, that's the standard for them. And I'm not going to be them. And I'm okay with that. And so because I hadn't listened to a lot of other podcasts yet, I thought that my little sample of podcasting was what was out there. And I was like, we need another option. We need to have somebody who's going to say something different. Later on, there's a lot of us saying something different. And I'm really grateful for that. And I think that's awesome because like the more numbers we have that show different ways of doing it, I think it's better. But so before I killed that buck, I had already decided like, hey, I want to start this podcast and started putting things in motion. And Adam, I can't remember if you and I talked yet before I had killed it about starting the podcast, but you were a ton of help in getting that started and leading me in the right direction. But I had started putting the stuff in, I had the IG account already locked down and all that kind of stuff, and then killed the buck. And I think, the buck was a blessing in that way that it did give me maybe a platform I didn't deserve. People would come onto the podcast maybe because of that. I don't know. But that's where it all started. That's why I did it. That's why I walked away before. And when I came back, I think it was an effort to try to show a different way of hunting where you don't have to go to the fullest extent, but here's both options. Here's the elite level, and here's the mid level, and here's the white belt level. And that was the whole motivation for everything.
It's interesting to hear you talk about it like that. Not necessarily like the podcasting stuff, but the hunting things. Because when you were explaining that, it makes me think of the way that I see like adult onset hunters is what I call them. But I feel like a lot of guys who like you can choose anything, like guys that are 35 years old or 25 years old, and they decide that they want to go back to school after not going to college or whatever, or they decide they want to play the piano, or they want to go do jujitsu. I think there is like, I don't know what the age is, but I think that there's like a mindset where like they're done fooling around and just going half-assed at stuff. And they understand that like time is valuable, and they're able to like either like super focus or like synthesize they have like a goal that they really, really want. And I think that that's what happens when guys go into hunting at a older age where you didn't start with like bad habits. You don't know like what Uncle Jerry used to do. And they take in and they consume all this content because everything's so available. And again, like whether you're, learning to play the piano or jujitsu or whatever, like nutrition, these guys go full force and then they end up kind of like this. And that's almost like what happened to you, like on a very disconnected level, like where you came back and you were like, okay, well, I know now like what's really important. So I need to make every moment that I'm in the woods matter or count. And I think that's, and I think it doesn't really matter if you're an adult onset hunter or not. I think if you look at these like elite guys, you either see guys that like absolutely 100% live in the woods, or the guys that say, I understand it, and I'm only going to put in the time when it really matters, and the rest of it I'm going to keep my PTO, or I'm going to keep all my like brownie points in my back pocket for this cold front, or when I know this buck's going to show up, or like whatever. They just do the things that they know. So it's really interesting to hear you talk about that. Now, what would you say to guys that are like on the other side, like that were where you were, who are I think the most poignant example of it is like the Dan Infalt of his youth, where he says like he was way too obsessed and putting his, identity in these deer and all this stuff. Like, what do you say to guys that are like, kind of like in the throes of that? Are you overwhelmed by the hundreds of food plot mixes out there? Well, you are not alone. And Vitalize Seed has developed a program that takes the guesswork out of food plotting. Vitalize makes it simple with their 2 core mixes, Nitro Boost and Carbon Load. Nitro Boost is their spring-summer food plot mix, and Carbon Load is for planting in the fall, each having a diverse mix of over a dozen seed types that are highly attractive to whitetail. Food plotting made simple. Each mix provides necessary nutrients to the soil, making for better plots each season. This also saves you money by needing less Roundup and fertilizer every year. The 1-2 system simplifies your food plots just how nature intended. And for the more advanced habitat managers, Vitalize also offers a variety of natural amendments with products like their seed feed that offers seeds immediately available minerals ready as soon as they germinate. Make biology work for you. Order now at vitalizeseed.com.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, if you're really young and you have no other obligations and you have some self-control, I say go out there and get it out of your system. Hunt as hard as you can, learn as much as you can. And as you start to get out of adolescence, you're starting to hit, 22, 23, 24. You have to remember these things that we're chasing, they're all trophies. And I don't mean trophy hunting. It doesn't matter if you make deer hunting your identity, or if you make making money your identity. Those are all empty trophies, really, in the end of the day, because somebody's always going to make more money than you. Somebody's always going to kill a bigger buck than you. And those moments that you think you're going to get that satisfaction, it's going to actually, like, once I kill this size buck, I'm satisfied. That is a false, like, look at anything in your life, any goal you've ever set for your life, and ask yourself if you ever felt that way. Because the chances are that it's not true. You always want something more. So if it's not actually going to give you the satisfaction that you think it is, you're better off spending time on really identifying what's important in life. And to me, that just comes down to relationship and really what people are going to say about you when you die. I was walking with Brian Dombrowski. We were scouting, and I don't know if you know Brian, but he's this amazing public land whitetail hunter. He's 1,000 times the hunter I'll ever be in my life. He's killed way more bucks than I'll ever kill in my life. And he looked at me and goes, do you ever wonder, he's the same age, we're both 47. And he goes, you ever wonder why we do this? And I'm like, yeah, that means sometimes it hits my head. He's like, what do you think they're going to do with their mounts when we die? And I was like, I mean, it wrecked me. This is this spring. And I'm like, oh man, why did you say that to me? But it's the truth. And so you really have to find balance, because in the end of the day, it doesn't matter how many big bucks you kill. That's not what your family and friends are going to remember. They're going to remember who you were. And I know it sounds cliche, and unfortunately, like, if you're not ready to hear that, you're going, oh geez, here we go, another old man talking on a podcast again. And I get it. You're going to have to learn it your own way. But I'm telling you right now, like, that is something you can take to the bank. It's 100% true. And so I just I went through a lot of heartache to find that. And I don't want others to have to go down that way if they don't have to,
So I don't see the old man saying that. I say that it's like really easy if you've killed a lot of big bucks and you got a 200 on your wall, and you're like, oh yeah, they don't really matter. Like, it's not these deer, and you've got guys out there that haven't killed anything, or that are still like chasing these trophies, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in that vein, like, as a guy who at one point did identify with the size of the deer that you killed or whatever, and you thought that was your worth, and now you're in the same space as I am, right? In this odd social media, where I think social media is like the devil, because everybody's killing a 140, and like, and again, like for a guy like you who's saying, you know, the very humble way, but it can be, you know, like talking down to guys like me, right? Like, well, I just kill 120s, 130s, like, you know, 110-inch bucks, like whatever. And there's guys out there who are like, haven't ever seen one in the woods or anything like that. And you're like, well, because of the circles that we run in, you know, you look up to these guys who are like, you know, killing consistent. And I think I heard you say it on a podcast before, but like, it was like one of your more recent podcasts where you're like, I think 150 is like the new standard, you know?
Yeah.
And
it's not my standard. I think it's become the new standard.
It's the Instagram standard. It's the whatever Huntress standard, I'll call it, just for funsies. And like, I killed a 150 on public in Ohio, but I think that that's like the pinnacle, right? Like, a guy for me is like, you know, that's not an everyday thing. It's not an occurrence. I've probably seen 2 other ones since then. And so to be like, oh, well, you know, that's what I have to strive for. Like, and there's guys who are like, I don't know. I've never had that mentality where it's okay, I need to, the next buck I kill's got to be bigger than the last one. Like, I want to have fun. I don't care how big the grip is. I want the grin. You know what I mean? Like, that to me is like, if I'm grabbing 2 big old doe ears, like, I don't care. Like, I want to have the fun, and I want to have, like, you know, the personal validation of like what you say, like, okay, you know, why are we doing this? Well, I'm doing it to be like, I'm out here looking for something, and I want to know that it wasn't all for naught. Like, and it doesn't, the antlers don't matter. I feel like they're like a bonus. And I think that that's like the most cliche. That's what bad hunters say. That's what, you know, that in the world. But back to what I'm getting at is like, in the like social media world, and for a guy that would like identify with the size of the antlers, then what do you say to these guys who think that that's normal to a guy like that? They were speaking to your former self of like, this is what I have to kill. Even if I've never killed a deer before, like you kill a nice basket 8-point and you're like, oh, it's not the biggest one or whatever. Like, I mean, that's the hardest thing for me.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity to clarify. Cause that wasn't ever my intention, was actually to downplay the deer that I've killed. It's more or less.
No, I'm just giving you a hard time.
No, I like it. I'm glad you brought it up. I'm sincere. Like, I really, I'm glad you're bringing this question out. The reason why I talk that way is because of the standard that I don't agree with that's out there. And so I think if you're tuning in, I'm almost trying to break that narrative. Like, so if you're tuning into me because you think that I'm some 150-inch killer, I'm not. I've never killed a 150-inch buck in my life. I think I've only seen one out there in all the states that I've hunted. Out of all the years that I've been hunting out of state, I think I've only seen one. No, well, yeah, you got the 200. Well, yeah, it's because it wasn't a 140. That's the only reason I killed that, is like, that was lucky that I found a deer. Now, I think that I broke down the situation and used skill to do it, but I didn't go out looking for that buck. I stumbled upon that buck, and that could have been you, me, or anybody else, you know, and then breaking it down and figuring it out. A lot of people can figure that out, you know, and some can't because they're not there yet. But the point is like, there's a big gap between what I've killed and that buck. And I don't want that buck to identify me at all. And I don't want it to really identify anybody else. I don't want anybody else to feel like that's what they have to do. So what I try to say is, hey, this is what I kill. I kill 120 inch to 130 inch buck on a regular basis. And that's fun to me. So if you want to do that, like, here's what I know. And it's very simple, basic plan. It's not sexy. It's not worth a podcast. Like, if you brought me on just to talk, tactics, I could sum up what I do in about 10 minutes. I find states that have bigger bucks. I sit downwind of bedding and I sit in a pinch point during the rut. And the first 120 or 130 that walks by, I shoot it. And that's actually not that, like, there's nothing more to say about that. And now, because of that, because I've done that for so long, my skills have started to develop, and that's fun too. And yes, there's a goal of killing a buck. And I'm still that way. I still want to kill a buck. I still want to kill big bucks. But that's what I'm trying to do. I'm actually just trying to say, hey, look, like, if you're looking for, like a huge big buck slayer, that's not what I'm about. This is what I'm about. Now, I'll bring in guys who are about that, and I really love listening to them. But that's not me, and that's not even what the podcast is going to be all about either. So it's more like a warning, really. And I'm trying to buck against the system a little bit, and just try to, I don't know, get people to think a little bit differently. But I never thought about it from the perspective that you were saying, that like it was downplaying something that maybe somebody else hasn't accomplished. But the truth about it too is I think that anybody can accomplish it. And I remember thinking that those bucks were so far out of reach for me, and I got so much into my head, and I put so much pressure on myself that it almost prevented me from ever killing that level of a buck. And so that's why I focus on the mentality part of it more, and development as a person more, because I believe once you start doing that and you release yourself of that pressure, then those bucks are, if you go in the right places where they have a good number of those bucks, chances are you're going to be able to do it. And I believe that about anybody. Like, I really feel like they're just a few steps away from being able to do it. And I think it's a great accomplishment. I'm happy about the bucks that I've killed, and I have a lot of fun doing it. I really do.
Yeah. And I think that's, you had said earlier about like the comparison, right? And it was so funny because you said money, you use money and bucks, but I always use boats and bucks, because boats are so expensive and they're like infinitely large. So it doesn't matter how much money you spend on a boat. Like, somebody has more money and they're going to buy a bigger boat, and you could buy the boat of your dreams. Same thing. Like, you could kill that buck you killed, and it's like the greatest thing ever. And then you're talking to Adam Hayes, or you're talking to Joe Miles, or you're talking to a guy that just spent 20 grand on a, caged buck, a high fence deal. And side by side, yours looks like not an accomplishment,
Yeah.
And there could be a guy that killed a 100-inch 6-point. That's the biggest deer that he's ever seen. It's 7 years old, and it's an amazing accomplishment that doesn't hold any weight compared to the score or what the book says against your buck or the high fence buck. And it means something totally different. And so by you saying like, I'm having fun doing it, that is, I think, what's missing from a lot of this. And it doesn't get, I think there are people that do a very good job, and I'll give a lot of credit to, and it's always going to be like your friends, right? But like the guys at Latitude, Aaron Blicey with the Fall Podcast, and David Riley, those guys, I think, do a really good job of showing like the fun, like the smiles. Like, it isn't just a photo, like and you see these non-smiling photos of these guys with these deer and like whatever, and like, oh, look at this, I'm very tough and I killed this thing. But the guys that are really enjoying it, and the high fives and all of that, I think is like, I think that there should be a score. You should be able to score the fun that you had, and it's funny what you say about just like being like downwind of bedding, like in a pinch during the rut. Like, that's how I kill all the deer in Michigan. Like, and I don't, and I say the same thing. Like, I'm not a good hunter. I'm trying, I'm getting better. And I'm very much learning, but that's something like no matter where you go, as long as you can identify bedding and as long as you can find deer, like that strategy works, 60% of the time it works every time. Right. I mean, it's the John Madden of things like, it's a very tried and true. But yeah, so, but the real question that I said, like the guy that hasn't ever killed anything and he thinks that the 140 on Instagram is what he has to shoot. Like, what do you say to that guy who hasn't even killed anything, but he's trying to keep up with the Joneses?
It's hard because I just think of myself and I never wanted to hear it. I mean, so I didn't kill a lot of bucks in my early, like when I first started. I was I would say adult, like onset hunter. I started when I was like 22. And I was holding off. Like I wouldn't shoot does. I wouldn't shoot smaller bucks because I thought back then 130 was the standard. And I was thinking like, that's what I have to shoot is a 130. And so I wouldn't do it. And it held me back. Like I didn't get better hunting because I didn't shoot those deer. Like I needed to shoot those deer and move my way up the ladder to get better. Like you can't, unfortunately, as much as you want to leapfrog it, you really can't. Now you may go out there. There are a few people who, for whatever reason, like the Rubik's Cube in their head just starts clicking like crazy when they get out in the woods and they learn really quick. We've had some younger guys that I've had on the podcast who seem like they're like that. But for a lot of us, it seems that that's not how it works and that you have to move up the ladder. And so I would say you're holding yourself back. I know I wouldn't listen to that because people said that to me and I refused. I was like, nope, I got to do it this way. And then I went out of state and then I saw, a 110 or a 120 for the first time. And I thought it was a 140 inch. And I thought it was the biggest buck I've ever seen in my life. And I killed it. And I found out later that it, I don't know, it's like maybe 120 inches. And then I realized, okay, that's fun. So unfortunately, they kind of got to get to the point where they're okay with not hitting that standard. But it's so hard because that's what everything is being told to everyone, and I really don't know how to convince someone to take a step down because I believe in development. I want people to press themselves, but there's a natural progression for about 90% of us out here. And I just don't know how to convince anybody that because the narrative, all the conversation that we hear in the space is that, oh, you gotta, it's this, it's 140, and there's only a few voices who are saying that it's not, and unfortunately we're getting drowned out. And so honestly, I don't have an answer to that question. I don't. I wish we could just tell them, but I don't think people are going to listen. And I get it because I wouldn't either.
So I guess I didn't go out. I went over some of the material here, the questions I had like ahead of time. I did not. So I want to address like somewhat of like the elephant in the room. Mm-hmm. Just because you're saying, and it totally like makes sense, like connecting the dots, like what you said, like weren't seeing the deer that you wanted, went out of state, killed some big deer. And if we talk about that, if we're talking about like the best use of time or being mm-hmm. like efficient, like go out of state and kill bigger deer. Mm-hmm. What about Michigan? Like you live in Michigan.
I know. It's Michigan. The thought of doing it here is like a constant thorn in my side. Because I feel like if I'm going to be worth my salt at all, I gotta try to do it here and really commit to it here. The problem is it's not actually the deer. Okay. Like I'm not anymore. I'm not leaving to shoot bigger deer. I'm leaving because I love the adventure. I mean, I cannot tell you how much I love going to different states. I mean, I rarely stay in the same spot more than 2 years. And yeah, I mean, so for me, it's more just seeing the countryside, sleeping out of my vehicle, kind of doing that whole thing. I love doing that. And yeah, I could do it here. When I say this stuff, I'm going to get people mad at me, but there is a different culture here around the woods. I think Michigan actually has some of the best hunters I think you could actually, I don't think it's just opinion. I think you can actually go through it and see that we have We have Eberhard, we have Andy May, we have a lot of manufacturers who are coming up with a lot of the best innovation coming out of Michigan. A lot of podcasts come out of Michigan. A lot of hunters who are now in other states come out of Michigan. And so, yes, I think we're a very talented group of people, but I'll just say it, like, when I go to the public land here, a lot of times it's trashed. Like the parking lots just look like crap. Like we're not taking care of our resources. The mentality is hostile at times. Not like there's going to be a fight or anything, but it's not like super friendly. It's not like if you run into somebody out in the woods, and I'm making generalized statements here, okay? There's plenty of great people here, but there's plenty of people who don't act so great out in the woods either. And there's a certain etiquette that I receive in other states that I don't receive in Michigan. And I've said this on a couple of different podcasts, but there was a time that I remember a small game hunter coming in, and I kind of did the whistle, like, hey, because I'm up on my stand, and he literally stood 50 yards from my stand for 15 minutes with his 22 looking for squirrels and didn't leave. And he saw me, he turned around, I waved at him. I mean, he knew I was there and decided, screw you. This is public land. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And he has that right. He totally does. And I go to Nebraska, and the next year, and a squirrel hunter's in the parking lot, and I'm on a 2,000 acre piece, and it's me and him. And he goes, "Oh, you're bow hunting?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I'll leave." I'm like, No. I'm just going over here, man. You can have all that." He's like, No. There's plenty of other places for me to go. I don't want to mess up your hunt. And he left. And that's normal. Like I run into that a lot. And I run into a lot of people. Now I run into some jerks out there too, but it just seems here that it's not as welcoming. And I may sound like a little whiny person when I say that, but when you go out of state and you're welcomed, and then you come back here and the public land is taken care of, you don't run into trash everywhere. Now that could be hunter numbers. We have more hunters than most states. Yeah, I get it. And a lot of states I go to have a lot lower hunter numbers. So maybe if they had higher numbers, it'd be trash. I don't know. I just don't see it out there. And so every time I come here, like I really want to fully commit. And then I run into a bunch of garbage, and I run into tree stands all over the place that never get taken down and all that kind of stuff. And it just irritates me, to be honest with you. And so if I made you mad about that, then look at yourself. Because if I'm describing you, then okay, then be mad at me. But if you don't do that stuff, then don't be mad at me, because I'm not talking about you. But I think you could probably relate. I mean, I'm not saying anything that's like new news to anybody. We all know, So that's been my rub with Michigan, to be 100% honest. It's not the size of the deer. It really isn't. Because I think we have in fact, I know we do. I've run a lot of cameras here. We've got big bucks here.
And so so you're running cameras here. You're finding the deer, and you're just like, too much trash. I'm not going to pursue this big old deer. Like, I mean, no, come on now.
Yeah. I dabble. Like I'll try to do it, and then I, something happens. I just get irritated. I think I'm probably just holding I'll be 100%. I'll own it. I think I'm holding maybe a larger grudge that needs to be held. And I get irritated a lot quicker here than I do out of state, which is funny because, I run into there's always something coming up, always on public land. And in other states, it just doesn't really bother me as much. But here I still kind of get rubbed the wrong way. And I'm like, that's right. My wife every year I say, hey, I'm not going to go out of state. I'm going to hunt Michigan. And she goes, and then I'll go and I'll do something. I'll come back and I'll be like mad. And she'll be like, write it on your whiteboard. Write it on your whiteboard that you don't want to hunt Michigan, because every year you go back. Because the truth is, I do love Michigan. I actually love the attitude that we have. I'm a little gritty. I like that we're gritty. I like that we're like, don't tread on me. Like, I really do love Michigan and Michigan people. But for some reason around the public land stuff, I've just got this thing I'm having a hard time getting over. But eventually I'll get over it. I do run a lot of cameras here. I do find some nice bucks here. And, last year I messed up on, I don't know, I'm so bad at like measuring deer, but he was anywhere between 120 and 130. And I totally blew it on him. He was standing behind me, and I whipped around like a total noob. And he was staring up at me, and it was over. So they're here. I just, yeah, I don't know. I got my little chip on my shoulder that I'm trying to get over. I am trying to get over it though. I really am.
Well, I just love it because, like, for me, it's, I don't know. I call it what you will, and I don't necessarily I don't know, like if I necessarily believe this, but I feel this way a little bit. Like it's like a badge of honor. Like,
Oh yeah.
you know, like when people are like, you know, I say, oh, I do a hunting podcast or I bow hunt a lot or whatever. They're like, so you hunt private? I'm like, yeah, probably like 90%, 99% public. And they're like, oh, really? And then like talking to like Aaron Blicey, like I've tried, like I think it was the last time I had him on the podcast. It was like, you're going to commit to me that you're going to hunt public land in Michigan. Oh yeah. Didn't do it. And like, it's just, to me, like for guys who, I don't know, it's just the strangest thing for me because like I love bow hunting, like I do, and I don't think that I could just be like, all right, well, as soon as whenever rolls around, like I'll go to Indiana again, or like I'm going to Kentucky, like all I got to do is get to November. Like there's no way. Like I can't do it. And we just set some cameras like, you know, less than 10 miles from my house on public. And it's like, I've hunted there a couple times, but like now it's like, okay, look, now I need to like really try. And I've hunted there and there's a lot of disruption. And there's a lot of chaos but there's a ton of deer and there's a ton of acorns this year. And I knew that. So I'm like, all right, we're going to go validate these spots, but I couldn't, there's no way because and it's, what's strange is everything you said about out of state hunting. Like, I don't know that I've ever had a bad interaction. I know some guys who have had bad interactions like on public out of state, but it's always been like near private. Like, but I honestly, I think maybe once in the last, God dang, it's got to be like 10 years now. I've actually run into twice that I've actually run into hunters from the state that I'm hunting. I'm always running into out of staters.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, where are you going? Like, what are you doing? Like, you know, because we're all on the same like 1 week time frame. So we're not trying to like screw everybody up where everybody else, I mean, I would imagine that if you were out, and, you know, I'd imagine we're seeing the same thing. Like you and I aren't in these other states, like during their gun season or during their like quote unquote, granted it's prime time, but I think gun season is where people like really like take up arms. But I think in Michigan, we have a lot more bow hunters. And I think their gun spot is their bow spot, is their granddad spot. And there is a lot of territory. But I think, I mean, when we were setting cameras, like, you're like, oh, there's a camera there, there's a camera there. Like, that doesn't matter. Like, we just know where they're at now. And we know, like, what they're hunting. We know what we're hunting. And we'll just work around it. And I think there's a much different mentality of, like, people who are, like, either defeatist and they go in the woods and they're like, oh, there's cameras there, like, I can't do it. Or, like, oh, there's a tree stand. Like, it's Michigan, so it's always going to be there. So, like I said, I like to play that devil's advocate to be like, come on, Matt, like you're talking about this, saying like, you know, like, come on, let's do it.
I'm with you. Cause like, I mean, I keep doing it too. It's not the amount of people, by the way, that doesn't bother me at all, actually, because like you said, I just use it because they're going to dictate deer movement. So that's fine. I just walk through. I mean, last year I scouted a piece, you know, here, it was 200 miles I put in it. And I ran, you know, a crap ton of cameras and all that kind of stuff. And so I really wanted to do it. And I did. Like, so opening day, I mean, I was here in Michigan, and then I would dabble. I shot some does on public. So I still, you know, I'm easing my way into it, but yeah, I'll get there one day. And like, listen, I've said it on my own podcast and others. I took the easy way out. It's the easy way out. Going out of state definitely is the easy way out, you know? And, but that's where I had fun. And now, and it really is not about the size of the deer. It really is about the adventure. I love going out and just finding brand new stuff in a brand new state and just, you know, trying to learn it all and have fun with it. So, you know, I'll get here one day. I will.
But I think, you know, and it's funny that you say that, because I do the same thing. And I mean, this year I wasn't going to hunt out of state. Now I'm going to hunt in Kentucky, but I've said it a lot. And like, I feel like repeating it. It always bears repeating because it's kind of like one of those like anchoring things where you keep saying it and it's like, okay, we're gonna make this happen. But realistically, and it sounds like you're in the same boat, is that like we just need to hunt in Michigan the way we hunt out of state.
Yeah.
And probably for you is a little bit different than for me because I know, like you said, how many miles you put on in Illinois, and I'm sure you've scouted Indiana and stuff like that. But for me and for most guys, like when I go out of state, like I've scouted Ohio a couple times, but I haven't made multiple trips down there or any of this stuff. So like it's getting in there, reading the sign, seeing it. And I feel like what I do most of the time around here is I go to this spot because it was good 5 years ago and it's close to the house and like I got the right wind. So, we're going to go set up blind, which you'd never do out of state, unless it was day 3 and you were like, okay, they were moving over here. This is what's happening, but we don't do that here. We have it predetermined when we go to a spot. And so like, I guess I would challenge you to say, okay, when you're going to go do this stuff is hunt more like you do out of state. And it never really works out that way, at least for me, because the times that it's good or the times that I can use the tactics that I use out of state, I'm usually hunting out of state. And so that's why this year I was like, well, I'm going to hunt in Michigan. Like I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do it. I'm going to hunt. I'm actually going to hunt our piece of private, I think, like during one of those time frames. So I think it's gonna work out for me pretty well. But like I think that's the challenge right there is to change the mindset to that, right?
Yeah. No, I agree. It's been something I've been working on for a couple of years now, and yeah, I'm getting inching closer and closer. Last year, I mean, I felt like I gave it a pretty fair go last year compared to the years in past. So each year gets better and better. It'll eventually get there.
So for you, I guess on that vein, like what makes, and especially now that, you've killed the mythical 200, what makes a successful season? Because you're a very goal-oriented guy, right? So
yeah,
how do you determine success?
Yeah, for me, so I'll be vulnerable here and say, like, I don't actually feel like this year's a successful season already. And the reason why is because I haven't put in the amount of work that I would like to put in. So if I put in enough work, whatever that is, okay, it doesn't have to be some crazy amount. Like I didn't start pre-scouting until like 3 years ago. And so prior to that, it was always map scouting, going in, figuring out the sign, and then hunting. I'm going to have to try to apply that to this year. But what makes me, so before, let me back up. When I did that felt like success. No matter what would happen, if I went in, I read the sign and I felt like I got, gave it my all. And if I killed a buck, great. If I didn't kill a buck, that was okay too, because I gave everything I had to it. And that meant like everything, 10 days, dark to dark, working as hard as I can. I felt great no matter the outcome. Then I started scouting, and then it became, okay, I have to put in all this pre-work. And if I put in all the pre-work, then I feel good. Well, this year, the goal was to do that again, to go out and scout. And I did. I mean, I've got to be easy on myself. It's hard. I'm critical of myself. So I scouted quite a bit in Illinois, but I didn't find what I wanted to find. So I'm going into Illinois almost blind this year. Like I'm not feeling great because I'm moving off my spot that I was at last year and going to a whole new spot. And by the time I found the spot, we were there for 4 hours in the middle of a rainstorm, and I scouted that, and that was it. And I haven't had a chance to go back and get in there. I'm hunting Nebraska. That one's always a kind of going off map scouting, so I'll feel okay about that one. Illinois, I'm having an issue with because I feel like I could have gave it more. I could have went out, I could have done more, and I didn't. And that's bothering me. It really is. Same thing with Indiana. I always hunt Indiana because it's close and it's fun. And I really didn't give Indiana. I didn't reach my goals for scouting in Indiana this year. I think I did one day, like a half day, and that was it. So I'm already feeling as if I have not succeeded this year. So now I have to like go, okay, that's what the issue is. It's like I can't change that. So now I have to shift my mentality and go into kind of the old school, give it everything I have when I get there. I just got to convince myself that that's okay. And I will. I'll get to there eventually. But right now I'm already punishing myself, you know, and I am that kind of guy. Like I kind of thrive off of that. So where my wife's like always optimistic, I tend to do better if I'm a little bit more negative about my performance. So, but that's it. That's how I did. That's what success is for me, is did I give it all? Did I get better in some way?
So I think it's interesting. I think it's very good for guys to hear that, because I think 90% of people out there do not do all of those things. You know, they don't do all of that leading up to it. And it's interesting because, you know, if you're Johnny Eberhart or you're Dan Infalt, and I just use those two guys because I've heard them say it, is like every time they sit in the stand, they feel like every movement matters, that they're going to kill. And I feel like you're like on the opposite end of that spectrum right now, because you're saying, well, I didn't do all the other stuff. And I feel like that's the way that a lot of people hunt. And I think when I started to be able to differentiate the two, because I've talked about it before, John's brother, who's a tremendous hunter, would get up in a tree, sit there for 45 minutes, and he'd be like, nope, not going to happen. And he'd get down and he'd move and he'd leave. And so I never really understood that until I started applying that and said, like, thinking critically and not saying, okay, well, I just put in all this work to climb up here. Like, I'm here, I'm hunting, like maybe, hopefully. What I stopped hoping and started hunting is like what I like to say is like, you know, when I'm there for a purpose. But how do you go into it with a negative attitude? You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like
I got to build the positive attitude. So like, I won't do it. So I did the same thing. I made the switch to not ever hoping. And that's why I feel like I failed myself, because now I know and when I failed myself, what that does is fuel harder work. Like, it's not the, hey, hands up. Oh, didn't do it this year. Well, all right. My 7-day trip is now probably going to be a 4-day trip. And those first 3 days, now, Matt, you got to work your ass off and scout and read sign better than you've ever read sign before, because you're really in crunch time. And I am holding myself to a higher standard now, you know, like in Illinois, I'm not going to shoot a 120 inch buck, you know, and that's simply just because I'm more aware of what Illinois is now. It's not because I think I'm better than that, because in Nebraska, I will shoot a 120 inch buck. In Indiana, I will too. So, but now I'm going to have to work harder. And so to me, it's like a fuel. It's like, it's not a like, oh, it's over. Like, no way. It just means I got to work harder. And I back when I was weightlifting, I would do the same thing. My wife would be down here and I'd be like lifting and I wouldn't get the rep that I wanted. And I'd call myself a little bitch, you know, and she'd look at me. I'm like, it's my motivation, honey. It's okay. Like, I'm going to push harder. So for me, it's not a deterrent. It's not like, it doesn't take the wind out of my sail. It lights a fire underneath me. And then I push harder. So there's a clear difference between the guy, and I used to be the guy who threw my hands up. I used to be the guy that said, oh, it's 70 degrees right now. There goes the rut, you know, or, oh, that guy just walked in on me, or this place is blown up, and I throw my hands up and then I wouldn't kill, you know? So like, I don't know. I don't even remember how I made the switch. I think it was just a switch in my life, not so much as deer hunting. And I started to go, no, I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to work as hard as I can. So now I can turn it around when I go back and I give everything I have. If I come up short, I'll probably be pretty critical of myself for not doing what I was supposed to do this spring, but I'll at least be okay to say, hey, on those days I gave everything I had, and I'll be okay with it. I'm not going to let it get me down. If anything, it's just going to be a lesson that I learn. And then it may need to be, one thing I am asking myself right now is, do I need to adjust my goals? Like my expectations for myself, because there's just a lot of things that got in the way that are good. The dojo definitely got in the way. And that's a good thing. And what I believe is you can't be great at all things. And especially when you start new endeavors or new things, you have to put the necessary energy to that thing. And the same thing with my family. There's just like my kids, you know, I've got boys now who are like in that teenage year who just really needed to hang out with me this year, you know, so I'm spending more time with them. I took another son hunting, you know, quite a bit this spring when I normally would be scouting, and I'm okay with that. So a lot of times I just have to check myself because that same monster that was there back in the early days still exists. Like I'm just holding him down most of the time, and he'll creep back up every once in a while, and I'll lose it for a little while. Like in a season, I may go a couple weeks where I become that old dude again, and then something like checks me, and then I push it back down and recalibrate. So that's probably what I'm in the middle of. I know it's probably more than what anybody care to listen to, but I think it's important to realize like there is like this. I think it's healthy to have this battle inside your mind to find the balance, you know. And I see a lot of guys get unbalanced because they're not willing to fight with themselves on those things. So push yourself, check yourself. You know, should you be pushing yourself, and really analyze everything that's going on? It's part of the process for me. It's ongoing always.
So I'm going somewhere with this, and I'm not talking about terrain. I'm not talking about antler size. I'm not talking about anything like that. I'm kind of like mentally back to that goal thing. Like, where you at? Like, what are your priorities in hunting? Like I said, I'm going somewhere with this, but like for you, like when you enter into this season, whenever it starts, January 1st, February 1st, like what are your priorities to meet those goals?
Try to figure out how to answer that.
Well, I guess I can tell you where I'm going with it, because I have a buddy who does this same thing, which is, I don't know if and I'll say it to his face too, but I don't know if it's ego or arrogance, or like he's just a sadist, which it sounds like you are too, to not go back to these spots that you know. I understand the adventure. I understand the you know, like wanting to prove it to yourself, the next challenge or whatever. But in a situation where, like, you know, you're teetering on like throwing your hands up and tossing in the chips and saying, I've already failed this year, to say like, well, you know, I could go back to the spot where I know there's big deer, but I already killed a big deer over there, so why bother? Like, what? How do you prioritize those things? Like, because if it was killing big deer, you'd go back to the same spot. If it was, you understand what I'm saying?
Oh, 100% now. Yeah, it's actually part of, dude, when we first started talking about the podcast, you hit me really hard on mission. And I threw you a mission. You're like, this ain't it. And so I went in there and really focused on the mission. And one of the pillars that holds up our mission, which is helping hunters become the best version of themselves in the woods and in life. So two things. One of those pillars is continuous improvement, is what holds up our mission statement. So that is the driving factor of my entire existence. And that's what I use hunting for. I could have picked anything to do that with. I chose hunting as the primary like vessel to move that through with me. And so it's not an ego. And I don't know if I could take away the buck last year. If I go back, so I've killed 2 bucks there. Okay. I killed both these bucks over my shoulder at that last location. I don't know if I could kill a 140 there. But I know where the deer are. Like I know that spot. And so I want to continually push myself and figure out a new piece. And that just because I want to continuously improve, I want to challenge. And so if I didn't put in the work, I almost feel like I wouldn't get any satisfaction going back to a spot where I know I can sit and probably kill a buck. Like I want to figure it out myself again this year. And I guess there would be nothing wrong with the mindset of saying, but no, you did put in the work and you did continuously improve and learn that piece of property. So you should be able to go back and enjoy that. I 100% agree with that. Anybody should be able to go back and do that. It's just not me though. It's not what I find a lot of joy in. I find joy in the struggle. I really do. And I find joy in, and actually probably going to places that make it even more difficult for me. Josh Arbogast and Ryan Regan went scouting with me in Illinois, and I brought them to the spot. And it's the stupidest spot in the world. But I mean, there's big bucks in there. But we literally are crawling on our hands and knees for a half hour because you can't stand up. And we're bleeding. We're like, and they eventually looked at me and they're like, yeah, dude, we're done. This ain't gonna work. Like, get out of here. And they're just almost looking at me like, this is like, what are you doing? This doesn't even make sense. And it doesn't make sense if the goal is just to go in and try to kill a buck. But for me, it's like, it's just a challenge. And if I could figure that out and just get a shot or just kind of get in the game, the satisfaction of figuring something that's very hard out is enough for me. And that's in a lot of areas of my life. I like that. And so definitely not ego. It's probably because, I mean, again, full vulnerability. It's probably because of a lack of self-esteem. You kind of want to figure out where you're at and what you're good at and what you're worth. And so I'm constantly searching for that. And I use hunting that way.
It's just so interesting because I'm thinking of like, when you're saying like, I know where these spots are and I just want to know where the deer are. But it's like in my mind, I'm like, it's like high school or like whatever. It's like knowing the square root of pi. Like, what's the point? Like, if you're never going to use it, right? If it doesn't mean anything, then what? And I understand the point of, figuring this stuff out, being able to apply that same thing to the other. But at some point, like, you become like the Andy May, where you said the Rubik's Cube analogy, but like you walk in and you say, okay, well, over there, everywhere I've seen deer, they always go like this. And it's the same, just kind of goes back to the downwind of bedding during the rut thing. Mm-hmm. It's just on a different level. And I understand the idea of like some of the spots that I hunt, I only have sought them out because they suck. But that's a Michigan thing. It's not, I'm just trying to get away from people, you know, and I understand that the bigger the deer, they're going to try and get away from people and all that stuff too. So, I mean, it kind of goes hand in hand, but like, I don't know. I understand like, okay, you want to do this, but like being behind the eight ball or saying like, oh, I've put myself in a bad situation. You're like, well, it's over. Like, but you have all these spots. No, I understand that. But
I'm saying like, to me, it's going to be no. Okay. Like, work harder. Like, I'll make myself pay for it.
And I think
I enjoy it.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting to like get in, like kind of like inside the mind of like this type of thing. Because like I said, my buddy does this with elk. And it's like, yeah, I'll just never go back there again. Like, I know I probably could, but like, I like to try other things that are really, really hard. And, it's like, I don't understand it. And I think I would say the same thing is like, I just want to be like validated and like, and like, that's the only reason that I like trail cameras is to validate the idea of the spot. I love being in a spot that I've never been to and having a deer show up, like buck, doe, doesn't matter. Like, I was right, and it's not necessarily about the kill. And I think like for a lot of guys who are starting out, that's one thing. The other side of it is like, trying to figure out, the sign, blah, 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 the sign. I think, I mean, we just went out and put a bunch of cameras, found tons of deer sign, found tons of acorns, but we're too early for like this year's good sign. And we're too late to know like what was last year's sign or 2 years ago sign. Like, you can't really see, you can find like, oh, there was a scrape here, but how often were they using it? Was this in a scrape line? I think maybe I could find that out, but it's not necessarily really readily available.
Yeah, I think, one thing too is I've extended my season. So I'm not hunting just rut anymore, and so I'm extending it out and I'm hunting throughout the whole, like right now I'm leaving in a week and a half for Nebraska. And then I'm hunting, multiple states throughout fall into November. So when I go to the new spots, I am learning, like trying different things that I think I'm learning, and hunting differently. Now in the rut, I'm probably going to go back to my bread and butter because I think it works. But on the other part of the season is when I'm scouting these new properties and figuring out new properties, like I'm looking for, like I'm really interested in buck bedding right now. Like I'm really interested in early season hunting. I would love to like actually make the shift to where that's my primary focus. And so I am challenging myself in different ways, and that's why I do keep traveling, moving around. The other thing too is I'll say this: I think it's held me back. I think it's held me back from being a better hunter by not staying. So I don't think this is a recipe for success, and I don't even think it's the wisest thing to do. It's just something that I do, and I've questioned it. But again, I guess my goal isn't to be the best bow hunter out there. My goal is just to challenge myself and become better in my way. Right. And so if my goal was to become like Andy May, I think that, staying in a location and perfecting something until I have it perfect and then moving on to another thing and perfecting that would be a really good model to become a very well-rounded hunter. I'm more like a jack of all trades. Like I'm the guy who can come in and lay some flooring for you, but it's not going to look 100% great. And I can paint the wall for you too, but it's not going to be as good as the painter. Like that's more my style, and I'm just good with it. Like I'm just okay with that. And so I would never prescribe what I do to someone who wants to be a great deer hunter. I think there's an element, I think you should dabble with it because it will, like doing different terrain will up your game, but there is a real quality to mastering something and then moving on to another and then trying to master that. But it was never really my goal. I just never had that as a goal.
I think that's an interesting take because I think I would 100% disagree with you. But for different reasons. Because I would say that that's not a way to become a great big buck hunter. Because you said deer hunter, and I think like I would say that that's how I would categorize myself, because there's a difference. And my father-in-law, Uncle Frank there, he is an amazing deer hunter, but his largest buck is 100 inches, maybe. And he's killed 4,000 inches of animal. Yeah. So like do the math on that. And that doesn't include does and whatever. And that's how I learned to hunt. Right. And so like, I have no problem going into the woods and finding deer, and that deer movement, just like downwind of bedding, basically translates no matter where you go. Mm-hmm. When you start to be this big buck hunter, now that's when you're looking at, okay, you're looking at these faint trails, and you're looking at, oh yeah, there's a bench there with all this stuff on it, and that's where the 120s are going. But you talk to Nathan Killen, and he's like, you go down below that bench and the thickest, nastiest stuff, and that's where you hear that twig snap, and you never saw that 150, 160. And he's like, that deer is a different animal. But the deer hunter never sees that animal, never even knew he was there, right? And so, like I say, I think that's where we live in the Instagram, as a guy that kills a 140. And like, it's another one of my favorite things to ask is like, and your answer is very clear, but I think there's a lot of people that love posting pictures on Instagram that would love to sit in the same ladder stand every year and kill a 150 and post a picture of it, then be able to go anywhere in the country and kill a 100-inch buck every day, no matter what. And I think that's, I think that deer hunter that you speak of is a different deer hunter than, the world sees, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's levels of it. And like, I think there's nothing wrong with a guy who wants to sit in the same ladder stand and shoot a 150 every time if he's enjoying that.
Depends on how loud he is about it. If he wants to tell me that he's a way better hunter because look at my wall, like, come to Michigan.
See, that's what I love about Instagram is that if someone just posts pictures, whatever, right? But like we're like in Facebook and stuff like that, everybody loves to talk and everybody's got a loud voice and a lot of opinion. And you could say I do too, because I have a podcast. So yeah, I get to do it that way. So I'm not, but I don't even get into the conversation stuff. I don't get into the forums. I don't really want to hear what somebody, unless I seek that person out. And I want to hear from a lot of people actually, but I want it to be the people that I choose to listen to, who do it for different reasons, probably do it for more reasons. Like the reason why I do it. It's really not, the number isn't the end goal. It's the process, which we all talk about. And it sounds cliche, but there's no other way to talk about it. It is what it is. I love the process. I do think that staying in one location does. I'm gonna push you back on that one, because so in that Nathan Killen example where he says, the deer traveled down, you have to stay in that terrain to understand that happens. And like we talked about, you've killed 150 inch, you've seen 2 or more.
I've seen 2 other,
yeah. So 2 other ones. So that's 3. I've seen 1 my entire time hunting out of state. And so I haven't learned about those deer yet. Right. So I killed a big one last year. Does that mean I know what 200? No, I don't know what 200 inch deer all the time. I learned what he did and it was very unique and it was very like eye opening. But even in that situation, I don't have enough experience with him, like Rindo Eric. He has killed consistently booners, right? Like he's figuring out that system. He's learning about them. And he's hunting. When he killed those bucks, he was in Iowa hunting very similar topography and land and all that. There's a mastery skill about it that I think you start to learn that deer, that's a different animal. You have to be around that deer enough to learn that. I bounce around too often to know that. I really think I do. In some ways, I'm learning it. It's just taking me longer than someone who I think can stay in one location and master that and learn that and observe it enough. The other part about it, I think for me, is I never wanted, in the early days, I was never observing enough. It was always about just killing the deer. And that's what I was saying earlier, when a guy wants to shoot a 140 and that's his only, like, okay, you might get it done once or twice, but if you're not like really taking in everything and learning what's going on, and it's all about just putting in enough time and getting lucky enough to kill it, it's going to be really hard for you to replicate. And it doesn't mean you've actually accomplished a whole lot. You've accomplished being out in the woods a lot and getting a little lucky, And so I think a little bit that's me. Like when I'm traveling and bouncing all around a lot, there's a lot of luck involved in that, and I'm learning skill that's helping the luck, get a little bit more lucky more often. I do believe that. But I think if I would have stayed, I would be able to understand those type of deer more. And I'll be like 100% honest. That's why I talk the way that I do, is I don't understand them like that yet. I'm not that guy yet. So that's my take on it. I'm glad you disagree. That was fun.
But I think it's interesting though, just in the sense of like I feel like, a lot of the deer that I kill are like lucky. We are not the, but I don't know. I feel like you killed that big deer because you knew what was going on, to the
Yep.
point that you sat through a rainstorm to be there exactly when it happened.
Mhm.
No, that isn't luck.
No.
Right? So that what the deer himself, or finding the deer, or however you want to like categorize that, may be lucky.
Yeah.
You weren't seeking out a 200-inch deer. The deer that you found was a 200-inch deer. We can say by luck, the year before you shot the wrong deer, and this one got bigger. I mean, I guess,
Yeah.
but that wasn't like by luck. You were there for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that that's the way that you choose to portray that, I think, says a lot. And I think that a lot of times these guys that, oh man, this is maybe a bad, but these
It's
guys,
honest.
but these guys who do have the ego, they do have the deer defining them. They put in the work, and they know 100% that's, but there's still some bit of luck to what they do too, but they will speak on gospel, whether it's scent control or buck bedding or moon phase or whatever. But the deer gets a say. I mean, there's so much luck involved you can have all the skill in the world, but you can put so much into it, because those guys that will tell you that it's all gospel, except for John Eberhard, I guess, will tell you about all the times that they screwed up too.
Mm-hmm.
Where, I think, he's never been blown at in his lifetime. So the set has never got him. But every other hunter will tell you every other time that everything else went right and it screwed up. Mm-hmm. So for us to just say that we're lucky, we're all lucky, but we put ourselves in the right position to have that luck. And so I don't know. I think it's just a different mentality, goal, like whatever. Like, I think it's we all seek different outcomes, and yours is, hunting, continual growth through hunting. And mine is just validation of time spent. And I think for others, it is to be the authority, or to be the best, or to be whatever. And I think that that's why there's experts and there's people who feel like they get lucky. I mean, you talk to Andy May. Andy May knows everything I feel like there is to know about deer, notebooks and everything from years and years past. But he always says, like, yeah, I got lucky, or, it was just in the right spot. I knew this was going to happen. Very humble guy. He's not, he would tell you the same thing, that the guys that he looks up to are much better hunters than him. And there's definitely guys who have the opposite take, And so I feel like for like the listener, I think it's a great conversation, because you have to, whether you're in your home state, whichever state that is. And it's funny talking to Ben Harrison from the Bowhunting League. He says the guys in Iowa say, I don't kill the deer they kill aren't big enough. The guys in Kansas say, oh, there's bigger deer in Iowa. Wherever you're at, there's always, it's that boats and bucks thing. There's always, you're always seeking something else. It's never enough. Right. But I think it should just be enough being out there and hunting, and, like I said, whatever your goals are. But I think you are too hard on yourself.
Probably. Yeah. I hear that a lot. So for me, like, if I could replicate what I love doing is actually teaching. I don't think I'd ever have an ego. Let's say I could kill multiple 200-inch bucks. I have ego. Everybody has ego, but I don't have it in this area. I don't think. My true passion when it comes to other people and talking about hunting is actually the development piece. I want to help people become the best version of themselves. it comes from my career. For 15 years, I worked with homeless individuals. And I was a director of a program that helped them reach their fullest potential. The mission statement that I have for the dojo is the mission statement that we created at the shelter. And then I transferred it over to here, really. And because it's really who I am. So it made sense to do that. So if I could kill multiple 200-inch bucks and explain to people like how they think and where to look for them and all that kind of stuff, that's where I would go with it. I would love to be able to teach that stuff. The reason why I say like, I don't want to talk about that deer a lot is because I can't do that. I can tell you about this deer and I can tell you about the things that I figured out and the mistakes that I made on him when he busted me and all of that and why I went in and did what I did. And for him, it was the right move. There was still luck involved. He chose to still bed, where he did and move when he did, because deer will do deer things. So, but there was some skill involved with that. So I can talk about this one. I actually don't feel bad talking about that one now. I just don't want, like, people will want to put that identity on you. And that's not the identity I want. The identity I want people to know me for is someone who talks about having, like, reaching your fullest potential and giving you hope that you can do that either in the deer woods or in your regular life. And I like uplifting other people who've done that. And I love giving them a voice. And that's why, I have a mix of people that I search out who are kind of these underground guys who have achieved some really cool stuff. And they are humble too. Like, it's amazing. Like, a lot of these guys I find, like, they barely have anything on their Instagram account, and I got to tease it out of them with a bunch of text. I bombard them and they're like, who's this guy? That's what I want to be known for. And that's maybe why I downplay that a little bit. Cause I think the temptation is to put that on you. When I first shot it, I had people tell me like, oh, you're gonna have 1 million likes. You're going to be able to like go sign up for pro staff with all these companies and all this stuff. And I won't lie. Like, there was a temptation to do it. And I'll even sent the picture out to 2 companies. One was Matthews Bows. I've always wanted to be a Matthews pro staff guy, just since I was like, cause that was like the gold standard when I first came in. And then I was so glad that nobody grabbed onto it later, because I was just like, oh, that's not who I am. But the great part about the story is, if I would have thought that buck was going to be my identity, literally, and everybody was telling me that's going to be the biggest bow buck on public. And, you're going to be the number one this year. A month and a half later, a guy walks in on a piece of public he's never been on, in a climber, climbs up, and like a few minutes later, a 215-inch buck comes in and he shoots it and kills it. Oh, there goes my reign. I got a month and a half. I mean, if my identity was tied into that and all that, and I had made all my plans around that, crushed. And guess what? Odds are I'll never see a buck like that again. So now what do I do? Well, thank God that that's not who I am. And I have a different view on how I want to be portrayed and what's important, And if a guy wants to shoot for that and I'm not crushing that, like, go. Like, if I believe it, if I find another one, dude, I'm gonna put everything I have into it. Yeah, it'd be awesome. But it's not gonna ever define me, And I think I just didn't want other people to define it for me, and that's why, So I don't know if it was so much being hard on myself as more or less just really being cautious not to like ever want to be defined by that deer, I did start to really appreciate it more lately. Yeah, I have. I really have.
Yeah, because I haven't put in that much work this year, so I gotta like look around and be like, oh.
Well, I mean, the fact that it's behind me, I wouldn't even put it up in my. I've shown pictures of it, and I actually took a lot of pictures down off my IG. And I've had it in some videos that I've done in the background and stuff like that. But relatively, like, it's never. I had a picture of it behind me in my podcast, but I've never had the mount up, And finally was like, all right, I just got to, like, it's okay, and it doesn't have to define me, and I can be happy that I got it, which I know sounds weird, but
that sounds strange for a multitude of reasons. Like, not because I know, like, I mean, my deer in the other room is like just the first deer I got mounted. Like, I shot that deer, and I wanted to shoot a deer that I could Euro mount, because I wanted to Euro mount, and they told me, you'll never hunt with us again if you Euro mount this 150. And I said, okay, all right, I'll pay the money. But I know what you're feeling, because you're like, this isn't, I don't feel like that deer is representative of the hunter that I am. It was just one day, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like if you're not using it to like bolster your identity, like you have to, like, why do we mount and display these deer? I mean, in my mind, it isn't to like build me up as much as it is to like honor the deer. Like, look at this thing, man. It was so cool. And like the ones that I have mounted, they're mounted like I shot them. Like they're both like one going one way, one going the other way, but both in the full sneak because that's how I killed them, you know? And I just, you know, brings me back to that moment to be like, you know, every time into like, you know, it sounds weird, but like honor the deer, like whatever, but you know, there's all these deer that people kill and I got a pile of them over there that are just chucked over in a pile. And that's, you know, it's for something like that.
Oh yeah. No,
you know.
it wasn't like that for me. I mean, he was in a spot that I looked at him head on every day, you know. I just recently moved him and I'm moving some, you know, 2 more in here, but they're all displayed in the same room. And I enjoy looking at them. It's different when it's in your house. It's not like I was hiding it here. You know, I remember when I killed it, my neighbor behind me, he's like 80 years old and we talk to you every day. I mean, I took the rack over his house and was ringing the doorbell as soon as I got back. You know, everybody that, you know, was in my circle, I was so ecstatic to show. And I want people to see it at my house too. But on Instagram, and especially on the camera, when you're doing a podcast, like it's a little different, right? And in my personal space, I want it out. Here's the thing that I'll get this all the time. And I people might say, well, you have thin skin. And I don't think I do. You know how many times I get called Mr. 200? It's getting to the point now where I like, at first I was like, oh yeah. Or like, if I say anything, it's like, oh yeah, Mr. 200 over there said it, so it must be true. And it's like, that's what I was trying to avoid, you know? And I get it. I mean, these are my close friends. And when they listen to this, they're going to think that,
I mean,
crap,
you just titled the podcast. I mean, it's,
oh, please do not, do not. And it to the point now where I've actually not my close buddies, but like some people I do care about, I've actually kind of like stopped talking to as much just because I'm like, man, if I hear that one more time, like I would love it for it to be something that I can just have fun with and not have that. But it feels like there's this constant, like people want to do that, you know, we see it all over the place. When someone kills a big deer, it's either like they get a really like positive label, maybe that they don't deserve, maybe that they do, or they get a really negative label. And I was trying to avoid both those things, you know? So me, myself, I'm very, I'll use the word proud of it. I'm ecstatic that I figured out what I figured out. And yeah, I like it. Like I like the deer, you know, but it was always my paranoia about other people. And especially with the dojo, because the dojo was already in creation. It was already going to happen. If I shot Spike that year, it was going to happen. And I just don't want those two things associated. And I mean, so I reached out to a guy that I like a lot. And I said, hey, will you come on the dojo? And he goes, oh my gosh, this guy kills 200. Now he's got a podcast. Do you know how afraid of that right there, that statement I was like, no, man, like, the dojo is a completely separate thing that was already birthed, you know? And so it's just that type of stuff I was trying to avoid, really.
So then what's next?
Yeah, people ask that all the time.
Well, but I don't necessarily mean like, I mean, because it's a very like twofold question, because obviously, you know, like we talked about, like the idea is, yeah, everybody wants to kill a bigger deer. Like, we'd love to shoot another one. But like, you know, the reality is for the both of us, it's probably, you know, going to be very difficult. So, and you're already at the like point where you're like, this freaking deer is giving me more mental stress than anything else. So then what's next? Like, what's the motivation, right?
Yeah, it hasn't changed. Somebody asked me that like right after I killed the deer. They're like, "What's next?" I'm like, "Well, I'm gonna shoot 120 inch." Like, like in some states, I am like that is going to be the truth, because I know I'm not going to be there a lot. I want to have fun still. I want to figure things out. I may start pressing myself. There's states that I've eaten a lot of tags in that I'll still hold that 120 at, and then once I reach it, then maybe I'll push it up a little bit and try to expand on that. I don't know.
I don't necessarily mean for like the inches of deer. I mean like for Matt, like the whole mentality thing, because it seems to be like weighing pretty heavy on you. So like if you don't want to be, Mr. 200 and you've got the podcast, like,
so I'm
next?
I'm one like, oh man, I'm going to release some stuff in this one. This has been a great conversation because it feels like it's very authentic, and we're not like, this is probably the most open I've ever gotten about the my mentality, not mentality, but my mentality, and then this deer. So it's caused me to, so I love creation. I love teaching. I really do. I've been tempted to go under the radar. I've been tempted to pull back. In fact, I think I'm going to with the dojo. I think I'm going to go down to two podcasts a month, which is completely out. I mean, I've been going pedal to the metal. And I feel like I want to just kind of fade back a little bit. I don't want to lose it all because I love the teaching part of it. But I feel like I want to fade back and get back to just out of the light a little bit. Not that I'm in the light a lot, because I'm really not. It's really funny. Like, this buck only had 300 likes. I mean, I have other posts about stupid things that have way more than 300 likes. So the book, and it's not like people are calling me up every day and talking about it. Rarely does anybody ever talk to me about it, right? But outside of my circle and that pressure, and I think that's because some of the mitigation I've done. I don't talk about there was a long time I didn't talk about the point or the score or anything like that. I didn't put the score in the post, when I posted it originally. But I don't know. I've been thinking about just trying to like go back a little bit and just continue to press myself and press my woodsmanship and just continue going what I was doing prior to killing him. I still really do love the teaching aspect of it. So I guess I say all that to say I don't have it all figured out yet, but I wouldn't mind just kind of disappearing a little bit and just kind of plugging back in, because I felt like before I killed him and before the dojo, and I think it's more the dojo than it is him, I felt like I was in a nice groove. I didn't have the pressure. I was learning. I was enjoying learning a lot. Like when something would click in the woods, I would just be like, this is it. I'm good for the whole year at this point, like I learned this thing. And, but like I said, I'm an all in kind of guy, and I tend to hit the gas really hard. And I feel like I did that with the dojo, and it's been really received well. So I don't know. I feel out of balance right now, in all honesty, and I'm trying to find that balance, and it'll take me a little while to find it, but I'll find it,
What's interesting about that is, I would say, give it, I mean, and it's a big deer. But I would say give it another 18 months or so, and you're going to really get back to that. Nobody cares what you shot last year. Like, you know what I mean?
I believe that. Like, there is a level of that. It's just my close circle that seem to care more, like, but no, I totally believe that. I mean, there's nobody that knows my name. There's nobody that says, oh, this is the guy who did this.
No, but I'm just speaking in like generalities, right? Like,
yeah,
Dan Infalt, John Eberhart, Andy May, Nathan Killen, Jake Bush. Like, how big were the deer they killed last year? What about the year before that?
Oh,
the year before that? Like,
yeah,
nobody cares. I mean, and it goes back to your conversation of what are they going to do with our mounts when we die?
Exactly.
But there, one of the things that I want to do, like for this studio, but I almost want to like find somewhere to put it, that's more prominent. As you know, in your phone, like every day, like on your iPhone, there's like a for you, and like my wife and I, like we share pictures of our daughter and like blah blah blah. But like I would say over 50% of them are like an old photo of me with a deer or a turkey, or hunting with my father-in-law, or like something one of my nieces and nephews shot. And it brings me back. And I know you're old enough to have gone into the sport shop and just seen like the Polaroids that were up there.
Oh yeah.
Of Bill's 11 point or something like that.
Yeah.
And like, you don't know Bill, but you're like, hell yeah, Bill, just for something like that, for like the nostalgia, because I think that we are really, because these images and these things we have in our mind, like aren't, when we see them on Instagram or Facebook or wherever, YouTube, like they're not tangible. You can't touch them. You can't, like, they're not a visceral thing. And, with AI and all this stuff today, but I mean, I feel like that is something that brings you back to a different time, a different place. And like, prior kind of like to all of this type of stuff, and I don't know. I mean, it's funny because I've been doing this, God, it seems like forever now. And I mean, for me, there's never, ever been any pressure other than like that's imposed upon myself. But like we started,
I agree. That's mine.
But I've always said like I'm the worst. So everybody's cheering for me when I shoot anything, right? There is the bar is very low. But I think that allows for like the space for learning and growing and all of that. And I think that's one of the things that you do really well, like with the podcast, with it, and with the mentality side of it. And that was one of the questions that was posed by one of the listeners, is like, that mentality side is not just for you a deer hunting thing. It's like mind, like physical body, food, nutrition, like all of that. Like, how big of a factor do you think that is in like the completeness, and like at the same time, like the mental health side of it from the dojo? Like how does that fall into your podcast mentality, and like how does that I think what drive like the mentality type thing?
Yeah, because I just think it goes back to that first story that I shared when I started. It was like how I wrapped everything up into deer hunting alone. That's not a holistic approach to developing as a human being. And so if you do that, if you're not hitting all those other areas, you're going to be unhappy. And I don't want other people to reach success, what they think is success, and then find out that they're unhappy. And I don't know I'm always cautious to talk about my faith, not because I'm afraid to talk about it, but I always want it to come off the right way. I don't care what you believe. I really don't. But for me, my faith has driven this idea that God created people with gifts and abilities. I come from a lower middle class household, right? I come from kind of being looked at. I was a West Side kid in Grand Rapids, kind of looked at as the kid on the other side of the tracks, like not high valued, like just that kind of thing. And I know how that feels. I'll wrap this will all come around. I know how that feels. And I never want people to feel that, because I later on learned that I actually had value and that I could accomplish things. And I went on to accomplish way more. And I'm not super successful. I don't make a lot of money, but I went on to accomplish way more than what anybody ever thought I was going to be able to do. And that feeling was amazing. And that started to drive my whole life. And that mentality, that's where that mentality comes from, was this realization that, wow, everybody has immense value. and they don't realize it sometimes. They look for it in these areas where it doesn't exist, or it only exists a little bit. And then they fall short and they're miserable. And I'm just like, man, I want you to experience what I've experienced at times. There's days that I feel that I forget that and I go backwards. But so it's not like every day I'm walking around like, oh, I got a ton of value, you know? But I do know it's true, and it runs through me because I experienced it. I know what it was like to live without value. I know what it was like to search for it in the wrong area. And then I know what it was like to discover and to still be in the process of discovering my value and my gifts and my abilities. And that's just my desire for everyone. And so that's why it's there. And I also believe that if you shift your mentality to this development, I have gifts and abilities and I'm out there trying to find them in a weird way, and I can't explain it. It will actually improve your deer hunting. You will actually become a better deer hunter and start killing more deer. And the tactics are there over and over again. We've heard them. There's nothing to figure out new in the deer woods. And so if you know the tactics and you're able to understand them and you're still not killing deer, well, I think it's because of this other thing. I think this is how you view yourself, the pressure you put on yourself. Maybe you get frustrated and give up too soon and you don't believe in yourself. If you have the right mentality over tactics, you will push through and persevere. And that persevere, I think all of the big buck killers that I talk to, they persevere when it's hard and they push on. And so that's what I believe. Mentality is more valuable than tactics. I really do. Because I know I don't know a lot of tactics. And I know I'm able to kill. And I've lowered my standards, you know, and that's why I talk about, like, if you're talking about 140-inch buck consistently, that's not me, but I can do this and I can persevere and I can push through. And that's where it all comes from. And it stems all the way back to when I was young. And then it goes into my career for 15 years, working with homeless individuals and watching them realize that and not become homeless and become, you know, sustainable and doing well. It comes from making that mistake with my family and feeling the pain of that. And so it is truly like it's me. It's not some kind of marketing thing. It's not any of that. It's just who I am. And I know no other way to do it. I really don't. So I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing there was the fact that there are, I mean, it doesn't matter, like, choose a podcast and then, or choose a personality and listen to all their podcasts. And a lot of it is going to be the same thing. And there are guys that are on podcasts that just, they have a track that they play every time they're asked a question. They already know the questions. And the host asks the same questions, and it's just this over and over and over and over again. So you're right. So I think adding that, like, full holistic piece to it, I think is what sets your podcast apart. And so for people who are, like, interested in that type of thing, and even though you were saying, like, okay, now we're going to dial it back, we're going to do, you know, whatever, you've got them this far, like, where can they find it, and what do you think is, like, the most important thing to take away from it?
Oh man, that's tough because we just cover a whole lot. So you can find it on anywhere you listen to podcasts, really. I think it's everywhere that I'm aware of, all the big ones and even the middle providers. You can find it there. Mobile Hunters Dojo. It's on. We're primarily put a lot of stuff on Instagram. Facebook we dabble in. It's not like our strong suit at all. And then YouTube, I've been doing some videos and putting some stuff out there, trying to put a picture with the concept of mentality. And I haven't gotten to where I want to go yet with it. So that's something I'm really interested in putting some more time into. So those are the areas that you can find us. We do, my favorite thing is not my biggest number getter. It's 10-minute Tuesdays. And so on Tuesday, we do a 10-minute, no intro, straight to the point. And I'm going to it could cover tactics. I could cover like personal development, really anything that pops in my head. It usually is one of those two: personal development, a challenge of some sort, or tactical type of conversation. Those are my favorite. And then we do the interview style on Thursdays. Those drop on Thursdays. And lately we've been pretty tactic heavy. And I think I'm a little worn out from that, honestly. Because we're going into the season and I've kind of given people what they want, maybe what they need. I know that's what I do. When I start heading out on a trip, I'm Googling whatever that trip is, and I'm trying to listen to it because I'm trying to figure it out on the way there. But we will go through a mixture of tactic or mindset conversation with people who are consistent in killing what people consider good big bucks, and sometimes those are young guys who've done it for like 3 years, and sometimes those are the guys who've been doing it for 30. And so we hit some of the guys who are on the circuit, and then we get some of the guys that are underground, and we kind of mix them together. So that's kind of what we're all about. It's hard to really define it all the way. There's not a rhythm. It's just kind of more gut feeling during the recording of where we're going to go.
If they're listening to this, they know the style.
Yeah. It's a weird one.
But yeah, Matt, I really appreciate you coming on, taking the time tonight, and kind of going through some of the hard stuff. I think a little bit different. So
it was refreshing. It really was. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Friends of NRA is your chance to support our Second Amendment rights and preserve America's hunting traditions. Join Friends of NRA at one of our 600 exciting events nationwide. From games to auctions and exclusive firearms, Friends of NRA events are your chance to support a cause you care about while having a great time with patriots in your community. Whether you're a seasoned shooter, an avid hunter or outdoorsman, or passionate about freedom, there's a place for you within Friends of NRA. Visit friendsofnra.org to find an event near you. Stand up for freedom with the Friends of NRA. Friends of NRA is your chance to support our Second Amendment rights and preserve America's hunting traditions. Join Friends of NRA at one of our 600 exciting events nationwide. From games to auctions and exclusive firearms, Friends of NRA events are your chance to support a cause you care about while having a great time with patriots in your community. Whether you're a seasoned shooter, an avid hunter or outdoorsman, or passionate about freedom, there's a place for you within Friends of NRA. Visit friendsofnra.org to find an event near you. Stand up for freedom with the Friends of NRA.